I was very excited when I first started to get evidence, and it was so counterintuitive. I'd put 20 Europeans and 20 African Americans on a sheet of X-ray film, and every African American showed differences, and all the Europeans looked the same. And I thought I'd mislabeled something, or I thought I'd made some drastic mistake. And we kept repeating and repeating things, and as we got more samples from different areas, I realized that it was a difference in the pattern, and that this whole new type of evidence based on mitochondria was going to change the way we thought about modern humans.
In 1987, Kahn and her colleagues published a paper showing for the first time that the markers stretched back to Africa, showing quite clearly that this was the birthplace of the human race. New Guinean tribesman, Parisian bartender, American teacher, Polynesian farmer, all were improbable relatives linked through one black woman 150,000 years ago. Their findings caused a sensation.
The responses of people were sort of amazing. The public was genuinely interested in certain aspects of it, but there was a tendency to misinterpret the data because of the terminology used to describe this woman, African Eve. And people thought it meant the biblical Eve, the single woman in the Judeo-Christian Bible of the wife of Adam. I have to say, even my own uncle sent me a Christmas card the year that our study was published saying, "How dare you, you know Grandma wasn't black."
Her work is rewriting human history. Through it, we now know the first mutations took place in Africa, maybe 150,000 years ago, and belonged to our genetic Eve. Professor Christopher Stringer, Britain's leading paleoanthropologist, was involved in the dating of the earliest modern human skulls.
This skull is as close as we can get to what the face of mitochondrial Eve would have looked like. It's a very complete skull found in sediments in a cave dating from about 120,000 years ago. And we can see here that it's a modern human. We've got a high rounded vault to the skull, a face that's tucked in under the cranial vault.
And this is what she looked like. Using forensic reconstruction techniques, muscle and flesh have been added to the skull and provide us with the very first glimpse of how our genetic mother might have looked 150,000 years ago. This is the closest we can get.
Wells comes face to face with the man he's been searching for. A new portrait of the common ancestor of every man today. Adam. Without a skull, we can't know for sure what Adam looked like. But a combination of genetic evidence, vendors' forensic skills, and cutting-edge computer software suggests he looked something like this. Thousands of years after the Bible, and hundreds of years after Michelangelo, we have a whole new face for Adam.
I like the expression. He's got a very forceful look.
You know, he's intent on something, maybe taking over the world. You know, you begin to get perhaps an insight into why these guys won out and why this guy's our ancestor.
So you have Adam and you have Eve. Both of them are black people from Africa. And here is the thrilling part. The DNA traced them back, locating them in a place within the boundaries of the biblical description of the land of Eden. Man, that just blew me all away. When science and faith intersects, to me, it is a phenomenal experience that this brother and the sister that I showed you, Mitochondrial Eve and Scientific Adam, as the scientific community called them, but as the faith community called them, we just call them Adam and Eve, the way the Bible calls them Adam and Eve. They were traced to be located within the boundaries of the land of Eden as described in the Bible. So now the Israelites, when they do their genealogy, check the Bible, when they do their genealogy, they trace themselves all the way back to this brother on the screen and to the other sister that I just showed you on the screen, Adam and Eve. They trace it all the way back to them. So if they are saying that this is our mother and father, if these two people are the beginning of our lineage, then it makes sense that the offsprings would look like the progenitors. It just makes sense to me. But now, today, when we think of Hebrew people or Jewish people, the first thing that pops in mind are people who look like that. Those are Jewish people in our minds. You know, we look at Jewish people, that's who we think about. We think about white people as Jewish people. Now, even though they may have DNA in them that traces back to Israel, does not mean that this is the way the biblical Israelites looked. Let me give you an example. Now, these brothers here, these brothers carry in their gene the Cohen DNA that traces back to Israel, linking them to Aaron. This is in their blood. These are Israelites. They have DNA that leads them back to the land of Israel. This sister is a beta Israelite. A beta Israelite is an Israelite from Ethiopia. She has in her genes DNA that leads her back, her origin back to Israel. But when we think of Israelites, this is what we think of. What does this say to us? It says to us, and I'm done after this. What does it say to us? It says to us that this white guy, along with the white woman, cannot give birth to a black child because white genes are recessive. Black genes are dominant. So the further away you move from the original, the lighter the skin becomes. So if you want to know who's closer to the original, if you want to find out who's closer to the original, it is they would be closer to the original Hebrews than they, because their skins are lighter. And she would be closer to the original Israelites because her skin is darker. If you want to know who's closest to the original Israelite, you can judge it by the shade of their skin. Because the darker the skin, the closer you are to the original. The lighter your skin, the further away you are from the original. So that even if they argue, so that even if people want to argue that these are Israelites because they have the gene, you can argue that. But I argue that since their skin is lighter than theirs, that means that they are further away from the original Israelite community just based upon skin color. Because you can't get this from this. But you can get this from this.
I know the elephant in the room for some is, where did white people come from? I know for some of you who are of a different skin complexion may have issues with Dr. Theron Williams' statements and are ready to troll the comment section of this video. I'm going to quote from two sources to give a simple answer to this question. According to BBC article, it says, some of the earliest arrivals on the continent contributed little to later populations, but between 37,000 years ago and 14,000 years ago, different groups of Europeans were descendants from a single founder population. Analysis of genes carried by Ice Age Europeans shows, among other things, that they had dark complexions and brown eyes. Only after 14,000 years ago did blue eyes begin to spread, and pale skin only appeared across much of the continent after 7,000 years ago, borne by early farmers from the Near East. Early European populations possess more Neanderthal ancestry than present-day people, consistent with the idea that much of the DNA we inherited from the Neanderthals had harmful effects. Scientists think that this inheritance was progressively lost via natural selection. The Agrinacians, a 35,000-year-old male from Guyette, Belgium, belonged to a distinctive branch of the Ice Age population. DNA was extracted from the upper arm bone of the hunter, who was associated with the Agrinacians' archaeological culture. Here's another source. According to Prehistoric Man and His Story by Professor G.F. Scott Elliott on page 161, the Agrinacians found the Mousterian or Neanderthaler in France, and during all the changes sketched above, the former seem to have held their own in that country. After the Worm Ice Age, the Agrinacians modified their weapons and mode of life. And after the theory which we have adopted became the men of La Magdalene, these Agrinacians and their Magdalendian descendants pervaded all Central and Southern Europe. Their remains have also been discovered in Valletta and Phoenicia and elsewhere, as we shall try to show later. But during this long period of time, two other races also succeeded in entering France and Italy. These were a Negroid, perhaps Pygmy, folk and the men of Solotre. We have seen that the Agrinacians was originally an African, and if he traversed North Africa on his way from Egypt and Mesopotamia, it would have been a very remarkable fact if he had not come in contact with the African pygmy or his ancestors, for the Bushmen, Wambantu, and other pygmies are the oldest African race known to us. On page 162, it says, still, this shows that a Negroid was not without honor in the country of Agrinacians. Moreover, since the discovery of this burial, characteristic skulls of the same Negroid affinity have been found in Spain, in Brittany, at Sierra, in Sardinia, at Ostorf, and perhaps in Caithness. So what's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your responses. But before you post your reactions, click the like and subscribe to the channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this fact, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was the... Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10.